Thanks for agreeing to meet us.
My pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am.
I ran a project and I got to meet I met your principal and I've worked with a number of your teachers. I did that last year and we had some fantastic results. And this year we've had some wonderful results in another project we're working on, which is looking at the SDGs, which I think is a really good segue to the questions you may have.
In fact, I think these students, they can be part of your Write the World project also because they have the potential to write well. I'll introduce them to that too. Because they have the
Fantastic.
potential. Yes, wonderful. Okay, so who's asking the first question?
Ariane, you've got a question. You got your hand up. Are you going to ask a question, love?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we have heard that you are very passionate about the SDGs and we need to work on them. So could you tell us why is it so?
I think that one of the most important things we have been given is the world we live in, and even more so, the gift of one another. But if we don't look after the world we live in, we can't look after one another. And so
True.
when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, we have to look after the earth, the life beneath the oceans, the life on top of the earth, and create a sustainable way of living where everybody is fed, everybody gets a fair education, and that there's equity and equal opportunities to succeed. And that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody gets the same thing. It means that we look at looking after people to give them what they need to be content and to be happy, and also to have a good standard of living. And sometimes that means somebody might get more than somebody else. But it's important that we work together, and that's why I'm so passionate about the SDGs, because we can.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a wonderful answer.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank you.
why was it wonderful? Can you see the...
Ma'am, because
Yes.
you said that everybody should be equal in the world. They should not be they should not differentiate between the types of people. Everybody should get the equal opportunities and they should succeed in those opportunities.
I agree.
Yes.
I think it's very important.
That's
I think
wonderful. And I'm happy that he picked up the essence of her answer.
Thank you.
She is passionate about SDGs because she wants equal opportunities for everybody. And if SDGs are implemented, worked upon everywhere properly, people will get all the opportunities. Wonderful. Who's posing question number 2?
Today, I think.
Okay, Kriday.
Ma'am, do you think all goals of SDG are equally important or do you give preference to a few? If yes, which ones are very important for you?
I think that one of the most important is life beneath the ocean. And it may sound like a strange place to go as a very important one, but I live in Queensland, which is on the very close to the Great Barrier Reef. And that's where I used to live, on the Great Barrier Reef. And what's happening is we are having a problem with climate control, which means, the methane and the carbon dioxide, they're banking up, and it's like you're putting blankets on top of the earth and it's keeping the heat in. But the problem with that is that heat is causing coral bleaching and acidification of the oceans. And it's meaning things like coral isn't spawning at the same time as where it should, so that you get fertilization and you get the coral reef growing. And because of that, the coral isn't growing. And our oceans are Earth's lungs. So if we don't look after our ocean, we actually don't, we're going to have a much harder job of looking after life above the water. So I think that that's one of the key ones. I also think very much that education is absolutely essential. And that's not because I'm a school teacher. That's because I think when you have an education, you have the opportunity to change the world. And in small ways. It can be through learning something or learning a new attitude and learning to take risks, responsible risks, and learning how to apply what you learn. And when things don't go well, actually pick yourself up and do it again, because nobody gets things right. And unless there's struggle, there's no learning. If everything is easy, there's nothing to learn. You already know it. So I think education and the life beneath the oceans are probably up there for me, frankly.
So, ma'am, education and environment are on your priority.
Yes, they are.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
I think that they both lead to the rest of them. I think when you have education and you have a world that is more fertile because it's balanced, you are more likely to get the capacity to look after all of the others, like no poverty, zero hunger. And
It is so
I've had his hand.
insightful to hear from you, ma'am.
My pleasure.
And we can learn so much.
Oh, you're a sweetie. Very, very smooth, Cride.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so
Kunan,
who's
you've
the
got your hand
next?
up.
Yeah, there's so many hands up.
That's
Already
good.
so many questions. Yes, who's the next?
Kunan?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I wanted to ask, can you talk about your work on the SDGs?
Okay. I really have worked around the SDGs for a long time. I teach in a Catholic school, and as part of the Christian ethos, and you're called St.Mark, so I'm assuming that you're a Christian school too, that we've been given this earth and we are stewards of it. And we have a job to do. We've been given the opportunity to protect, to use, but not to exploit. And that means we make sure that nobody else exploits it either. So I think that as part and parcel of my learning and my teaching, learning about social justice and social teachings about solidarity and human dignity have always been part of my teaching and my learning. And that led into the SDGs. And I was very lucky because I got to go to Tokyo last year and I was part of the ASEF conference. It was fabulous. And I learned a lot more than I thought I was going to about the SDGs. And the most important thing was I learned how important it was to make sure that my students learn on a daily basis just how empowered they are, how powerful they are to be advocates, to be educators of other people like you are with your green screen behind you, and to be activists, to actually do things to make a difference. And I think that the SDGs are for everybody, and it doesn't matter how old you are. I think everybody has a part to play. I hope that helps.
Yes,
Thank you,
Kanan, did you get your answer?
Yes, ma'am.
What you were looking for?
Keep in mind, if
Ma'am,
I haven't answered, please ask me again. I may have
Yes,
gone
that's
off
what
tangent.
I meant to say. If you have got the answer, fantastic. If you want to ask any more questions related to that, you can go on. Okay?
I
Anyway,
promise I don't bite, and certainly not through a screen.
yes, who's the next? There are so many hands raised.
That's good.
Vansh, are you going to ask a question now?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am,
Okay.
if we talk about health, so where does Australia rank in health?
Where does I that's a little bit distorted, so I couldn't hear you very clearly. I think you asked where does Australia rank when it comes to health. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes.
Generally speaking, I haven't got the statistics in front of me, but generally speaking, in terms of health, we have got a very good health system, but it's not, I would say it's not equitable, because we do have a wonderful, rich culture of our Indigenous Aboriginal Australian people. And sadly, their mortality rate is lower than the white Australian or the Euro Australian population. There are a greater number of deaths at birth in the Aboriginal community. And there are lots of reasons for that. And I think that that's one goal that Australia particularly needs to pay attention to. And we are. And this week is actually NAIDOC week. So it's our week of celebration, recognition, reconciliation, and effort to try and bridge the gap. So there should be no Indigenous poverty. We should make all poverty history and make all health equally accessible. And that is a goal that we're working on. Does that answer your question?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
My pleasure. And
Okay.
Ridma?
Yes, Ridhima, you can ask your question.
Am I audible?
I can't hear you.
Am I audible now?
You've got to speak closer to the microphone, my lovely.
Yeah, you need to be closer to the mic.
Yes, continue now.
And if you can't hear, you can always type your question. I'm sure somebody will read it to me. But please have another go.
Connect my microphone.
Geeta, I can't hear her. Who else has got a question while we wait to work out?
There would be somebody else. Is there anybody else with the question?
Right, we have.
Yeah, Punya and Devansh also.
Well. Yes.
Devansh, who's going to ask? Devansh, are you there?
So this is Samriddhi?
Yes. No, Mom, Devansh.
Oh, hello, Devansh. Nice to meet you. Where are you? Let me have a
nice
look.
To meet
there
you
you are. I like your background.
Thank you, Mom.
So what can I do for you?
Yeah. Mom, I want to ask that, has the pandemic affected the students in Australia?
Oh, definitely. In Melbourne, they've been in lockdown for 8 months. And so literally this last 2 weeks, that's the first time they've been able to go back to school, really. They've had to work remotely. My school were only remotely learning for 5 weeks. And we were very lucky because my school we had one-to-one computing. And so my students were used to using tools and using things like Meet and Teams, as I'm sure you are doing because you are using Meet here. And I think for most of them, had we not had Teams, they would have found it much harder. But every day we would meet 4 or 5 times a day. And in the mornings, I would do a roll call, but I would do things like have a scavenger hunt. So I would set a timer and tell them to go and get, fluffy socks or the craziest hat or a photograph of their parents. And we would have, the first 15 minutes of doing things, getting to play, getting to know each other better, because we couldn't do that in the classroom. So what happened was we would play every day with something. I would still teach them and we would have meetings, but there was sufficient play. And we also have a subject called positive psychology where we look at strengths and resilience, and students were posting their art. Students who are really quiet were showing their art and their poetry and their stories and their videos and their photography, and people were getting to know them in a way they would never have learned otherwise. So yes, we had the pandemic has caused issues for our education, and we've had to adapt just as you have. But we are all adapting together and we are all learning together. And the most important thing is we need to keep connected together and celebrate that, celebrate the uniqueness of each other, because that gives us the strength when you go back into the classroom, your relationships are strong.
Thank you, Mom.
My pleasure.
Was that understandable to you, Devansh? Did you get your answer?
Yes, Mom.
What did man say? That you need to be connected. Even students in Australia are affected. You are not the only students to be affected. Here also, it's been now 8 months since we are doing remote learning. And it is telling on everybody's mental health. So,
Yes.
which is why perhaps Kannan is already flashing that good health and well-being. Kannan? Is
That's
that
very
the
clever.
reason? Anyway, who's the next? Mm, I can't. Yes. Okay, Punya or Samriddhi, can one of you, or Ridhima, are you okay with
Yes,
your mic now?
yes, ma'am. Ma'am, can you hear me now?
Ye-
So I'm
Yeah,
just trying.
Ridhima, I think you are much better now. You
Lovely,
can.
Ridhima.
Thank you. Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, first of all, I really wanted to wish you good luck for your project
Thank you.
to save the oceans and the coral reef. It interests me a lot too. So I wish
Lovely.
you the best of luck.
I hope you
And
get to
ma'am,
see it.
yes, ma'am, like after the lockdown, I would love to see it.
Yes.
Yes. So, ma'am, my question for you today was, ma'am, can you tell us some ways in which we children can contribute to the SDGs?
Definitely. I think it comes down to, as I keep saying, being a participant rather than a passenger in life. So that means that when you see rubbish on the floor, you pick it up and you put it away. When you're at home, you have leftover food, you compost what you can. You put the plastics into another container and let them go to a recycling if you have that capacity. It may come down to advocacy. We had the project, and I don't know whether I can share with you. Have I got sharing rights here, Geeta? By any chance?
I think I can
I think you
make
can.
you. Yes, I can do that. Just give me a second. You carry on with your talking, and meanwhile, I'll
Yeah.
figure this
So
out.
what I've done, what we have been doing this year is we have been running a project where there are lots of different ways for people to respond to the SDGs. Now, in the ideal world, prior to COVID, we had intended to do a range of tools, and it would have meant that you could have worked together as a team to produce outcomes. But there's been so much uncertainty, and people are at different points. And frankly, as your teachers pointed out, everybody is feeling very stressed. So with my project, instead of it being as integrated and students working together from around the world closely and doing these sorts of things, I was very conscious of not wanting to put extra pressure on teachers and students. So it's been a slightly different, but I'll show you what it looks like. Let me just go to, that's me sharing. Am I sharing my screen? Because my screen,
Not
is it sharing? It's showing it all?
No, not yet.
It's not visible.
yet.
Okay.
It's not visible.
Well, let me have a wee look. So, you can't see that either, I suppose. No?
No, 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 not
Hold
yet.
on. Hold on. Let me just get back to you because there we go. Share screen. Here we go. There we go. So, you could see here that we have a website, and in the website you can see that, and you can join this, you can add to it. It'd be wonderful. In fact, it'd be lovely to be able to share what we're doing this afternoon. This basically gives you an idea of where the project came from, and so we have a link that you can access. It tells you all about the Sustainable Development Goals, but we also have, and I made this for you actually, and I will send the link along, but it's an opportunity for you to actually respond to the SDG that matters to you by using a tool called VoiceThread. And I'll show you what that looks like. I'm hoping you'll be able to hear my screen. Please let me know if you can't. But what happens is you can go to this VoiceThread point and you can add a comment. So I've given you a task. You know, we live in a complex world of inequity, but not hopelessness. The SDGs invite us to be participants and agents of change rather than disempowered passengers. So choose one SDG that you care about and tell me, why is it important? And what could you do? So I know that we were asked, what you asked before about what we could do one-on-one, but when you look at the different topics, things like zero hunger, make sure that we are sharing, we are providing for others as much as possible, not wasting food. That's important too. Quality education. So you can come down and click on this little button and it gives you a chance to text your answer or record your answer or to film your answer. And then it will end up like a little square like this one. And we will all be able to listen to each other's responses. So I'm thinking that that would be a nice way for us to share our ideas and our thoughts here. I'm just trying to find our link. Where are we? I've lost you. I know you're here. Let me find you. So I did make the link for you, and I shall. I've lost where you are. Let me get rid of all of those things and maybe you'll come back. Here, oh no, there you are. Okay, so back to the meeting. There we go. And I'm going to, have I stopped sharing? Not yet. Did I've stopped sharing? Good. So the idea is that you have the capacity to talk to each other and for other people from around the world to talk to us. And all of these opportunities to connect to the SDGs give us little ways of moving. So with that website, you can go into any of the links and it will take you to a page on each SDG. And you can see student work and you can see ideas. Some people have done blogs, some people have done posters. Some have made cartoons and comics. Some have run little projects where they're trying to make a difference by, for example, raising money for bamboo straws or metal straws or those special water straws where people can suck water, but it filters the straw. So I can't remember what it's, Straws for Life, I think it is. So the straws are things that can help with people's health and for water purity. So doing things like getting behind projects, fundraisers, being conscious about refugees, being conscious about the homeless, being conscious about recycling and not buying cheap clothes, because cheap clothes are often created in environments where people aren't paid a fair wage. Those sorts of things that matter. And they're also things that we can make choices about. Buying local goods means that you're looking after the people in your community and the money stays in your community so that they get an equal opportunity to have good food, have a decent living, have an education. When money goes out overseas, that doesn't happen. So it's about being a little bit more canny about individuals being able to do things. But also, I think checking what your parents are putting into the shopping trolley helps too. And not doing things like running air conditioning if you really don't have to, or sitting on your computer or your telephone, because connection is absolutely key for everything. And communication, talking to one another, being when you're able to be in the same room together, actually celebrating that and spending that time together rather than side by side on a device. And I advocate digital technologies, but I think it's really important that you have the opportunity to really build relationships, because good relationships and social involvement is the key to living a long life and living a satisfying life, because it gives your life purpose. And when you have purpose, the SDGs are part and parcel of that, because you're looking after your community and you're looking after one another.
Wonderful answer. There
Yes,
was some question, I don't know who's going to ask this, but they were talking about, yes, the banner that Kannan has, good health and well-being. There was a question on that. Somebody felt that in India, this is the most important SDG at this point of time. Who's
yes,
the
ma'am.
one who's asking this question?
That was actually my question. I think it was written in my paper. So should
So
I
it
ask
doesn't
it?
matter. Oh, yeah, of course you can ask it. How does it
Okay.
matter? Please.
Okay, now. So my question was that if we practice the goal 3 of SDGs, which is good health and well-being, will it support India when it has when it has pollution?
I think it does. I think that despite the fact that you have to have the goal to be the target, to rally everybody to work for good health, to work for the environment that will allow that. And if you just allow things to happen without ever saying anything to say, this isn't good enough, We need to pay attention to pollution. We need to pay attention to the pollution in our waters. We need to maybe revegetate areas so that water has the opportunity to filter. If we don't say anything, then we cannot expect anything to change. Well-being is as much about a mental state and an attitude as it is about a physicality of being healthy. And sometimes when things are difficult, you have to look after your mental well-being more than anything else, because ease is when you're comfortable and everything's fabulous. Dis-ease means it's not, but that can actually be the precursor to disease, where people get sick. So we must look after the mental health of people, and we must look after, where we're able, the physical health of people. So doing what we can to make sure that we support opportunities for wells, for example, for fresh water. As I said, I think the straws for life, the straws for people who are in environments where they don't have fresh water, where drought happens and the water they're drinking from is not good, and disease is carried in that. You know, we have to advocate, ask governments, draw attention to the situation, and not assume that because we're young that, well, you're young, I'm not so young, but to not assume that being young means that you don't have any power, because you do. That's the thing about the SDGs. You are powerful. You are empowered. The whole point of the SDGs is to say we need to work together, and you are part of that journey. So every little thing you do, when you turn around to an adult and say, excuse me, put that cigarette out. Have a glass of water, Mum. Pick up your rubbish. We don't need to spend money on takeaways when we can go home and use the things we have, so that the money we have is used most effectively where it's needed, not just to satisfy what we want, and think about other people's needs as well. So I think that the good health and well-being in India, I'm not as familiar with the conditions as they are, because obviously your country is quite large and it's quite different everywhere. It's a bit like Australia. Australia is very large, and on the outside, everybody's living a really lovely, seemingly lovely life. In the coastal towns, in the cities, everything's fantastic. But if you go inland, if you go into the little towns, we have drought and we have famine for animals in areas that are totally crippling our agricultural community. So, we're different, but we're very similar in lots of ways. And I think that good health and well-being has to be key for everybody. But the first place to start is mental health. And then having a positive attitude about embracing a healthy lifestyle. So sleeping, going to bed when you're told to, because you need to sleep to learn. Eating healthily, don't eat rubbish. Making a point of cutting down sugars, because sugars really don't give you anything but shallow calories. Eat healthily. And when you have excess, share it. And if you've got a friend or you've got somebody in the classroom who hasn't got as much lunch, share. Because connection and communication is absolutely essential. That's how we live. That's what we must do.
Okay. Samriddhi, you can ask your question. Are you ready with it?
Hi, Samriddhi. You can unmute us.
Ma'am, so my question is, who do you think has worst affected? Whose well-being is worst affected? The students, the parents, or the teachers? In your opinion?
In my opinion, oh, that's a hard question, Samriddhi. Parents, I am sure, would say that they are the worst affected, because all of a sudden they're doing things and trying to juggle family and trying to give you support at home and trying to run a house and trying not to go crazy. Students are affected because they are limited by their walls, but in lots of ways, you might be limited by your geography, but you're not limited by your imagination. So a good book, a paintbrush, a pencil, drawing, writing, making movies, using the computer to create, you have a broader vision and you have a world, and you also are very good at allowing yourself into that world. Teachers, I would have to say, I think really the people who had the hardest time are the medicos, the frontline workers. But I think teachers have had to not only do what they normally do, but they've had to learn skills that they didn't know they were going to need. And some were already there, but others have this massive learning curve. It would be like me asking you to do quantum physics. And you'd sit there and go, oh, but I know my multiplication tables. How am I supposed to be able to do that now? Give me time to get used to it. Well, teachers didn't have time. So they had to learn very quickly how to use different tools and how to present themselves on a camera, how to fix when things didn't work the way they were supposed to. And keep in mind, teachers are pretty good at making things look like everything is effortless. But we have all had a very important lesson in something called productive failure. And as I said earlier, if you don't have struggle, you don't learn. So teachers have had a big learning curve, and they've had responsibility, and they have a massive heart and care for their students. I'm going to have to go on the side of the teachers, frankly. I get that kids have had a problem and have a lot to deal with, and it must be very lonely at times. But I do think, seriously, I kind of think the teachers. So I think when you do get to see them again, give them a big hug if you're COVID able. And if you can't, do what I find is I get these beautiful cards and pictures that are sent and even put on my computer. And they mean a lot to me because my day isn't just my working day. My day has gone from being a 10-hour day to a 15-hour day. So I can talk to my students when they need me. And I think that that's the same for your teachers too. So anything you do, whether it's a card or a hello or a smile or a thank you, gratitude is a very important lesson to learn. And so, yeah, I think teachers, frankly. And your parents are fantastic, don't get me wrong. And those parents who are teachers, you are saints. But yes.
Okay, Punya, are you there with your question? I think you haven't yet asked anything. Yes,
sorry,
please.
darling.
Now you said that we first have to avoid mental health problems. So how can we avoid mental health problems?
I got something about how can we do something with environmental problems. Did I miss anything? Did I miss anything else? Punya.
Punya, you need to repeat because it was echoing a lot. We couldn't actually figure out the question.
Would you mind? Would you, I know you've got your telephone, but can I ask you just to sit up or either stand up a wee bit so I can see your lips? Because that might help me. Thank you. There you go, darling. I can see your face now. So ask me nice and slowly.
How can we avoid mental health problems?
How can you avoid mental health problems? Well, there are lots of things. And I have on that website that I showed you, and I have sent it and I will send it again. I have actually made mindfulness activities because I think when we actually invest ourselves in being in a mindful place, things like coloring, actually taking time and allowing yourself to enjoy the flow of coloring, that isn't wasting time. That is actually you giving your brain time to stop and to stop worrying and to stop feeling like you're missing out, because fear of missing out is a devil. It makes you feel miserable. But mindfulness can come from taking time to savor the food you're eating or looking out the window. I wake up in the morning and I see cockatoos, and they are big, loud, noisy birds, but they're beautiful. And I take time to celebrate them, to enjoy them. Because when you can appreciate things around you, it makes it harder to be miserable. And on this webpage, there are lots of activities. There are some activities for coloring. There's some activities and challenges. There's a choice board. So there's lots of things you can do. But one of the best things you can do is to do something for somebody else. Because when you do something for somebody else, it might just be making mum a cup of tea. It might be looking after your annoying little brother when he's annoying. It might be not getting cranky with your sister when she's being really dictatorial. But doing something nice for somebody else can actually make you feel really good. And when you feel really good about yourself and you have that lift, it makes it so much easier to cope. But the other thing is, we are biologically set up so that we have 50% of our genetics will establish our happiness. 10% of our genetics, or 10% of our happiness quadrant is environmental. But that means we've got 40% control over how we feel. So if we have 40% of control, why would we choose to use it being miserable and going into that negative self-talk? So things like, we call them cockroach thoughts here. So thoughts that don't help you, if you can't do anything about them, let them go. Because seriously, they're not hurting anybody but you. Nobody else is going to notice them, and they're not helping. So if you can't do anything about it, let it go. It's a bit, and if somebody's nasty to you, this is the best one. If somebody's nasty to you, think of it this way, and please put your fingers in your ears, teachers. Imagine somebody was to give you a paper bag of dog poo. Would you take it? No, you wouldn't. No. And do you know why? Because you would be disgusted by it and you wouldn't want it. Why then would you accept when somebody makes you feel bad? It's not about you. It's about them. Leave them with the problem, and it's not yours, which means that you're taking control of your own mental health. You don't need to accept what people give you. You take advice, you can think about it, if you can accept it or let it go. Because your mental health is most important. And I think doing things for other people, laughing when you can during the day, and when you're at home, get a hug. Because a heart hug is so good for your soul. And as a Catholic and a Christian, I would pray. I talk to God all the time. I think that whatever you understand God to be, the creator to be, doesn't make any odds what that is. When you understand the world is a bigger place than just inside your head, it means that you can open your hands and say, I put it in your hands. I will just do the best I can do with me today and be the best person I can be. That's really all we can do, I think. That and drink lots of water.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, who's the next? Did Vansh ask his question?
Vansh, have you got another question?
Oh, Vansh
Yes,
has
ma'am.
already asked. Okay, Vansh has already asked. Neonita, do you?
Ask a question.
Go for
Yes,
it, Neonita.
please.
Ma'am, my question is that how can we motivate ourselves and our peer group during this pandemic?
Okay, what I did, because you do have teams, don't you? Nod, yes, you have teams? Yeah, good. So with your channel for your class, if you have a class captain, every day do something. So it could be the scavenger hunt. It could be a quick draw. Now, I have all of these things on that website, so you can have a play with them, and I can also put some others up too. But what you do is each day do something where you're learning about each other, and celebrate the people that you don't normally hear from in class. Because the unique thinkers, the people who often slide under that radar, they are the adults you want to know when they are adults. Because sheep all think the same way, and they're not interesting company. But when you have people who have the courage to be themselves, to accept themselves, to try new things, to share their work, whether it's art or whether it's cooking, recipes, challenges, they're the people you want to know as adults. So celebrate them now while they're in formation. My girls, because I have a girls' school, we had things like the craziest milkshakes. And so we had the weirdest sorts of combinations. Another student set up a cooking challenge, and every day somebody would put up a new recipe and what they'd cooked for the day. Another one did art. We had one girl we didn't know could draw, and she's fantastic. Another one showed comics and ones that she had made about dragons. So there were all sorts of different things that the students generated. I started it, I would meet them, but then they would continue them. And the class captains would keep it rolling. So everybody commented and everybody liked and put hearts up and nice comments on, because constructive caring and being engaged helps your heart, but it helps the other person too. And it keeps that cohesion. When you go back to school, it means that you know each other and you've been through this together.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Wonderful.
And ma'am, I also want to ask one more question.
Yes, go for it, darling.
And ma'am, how did the students cope up during this pandemic?
How did they cope? I think they did incredibly well. I think because we had already been, I've been using Teams now for 6 years or so. And even though my grades, because I have grade 7, so they're only a year above you, I have grade 7s, grade 9s, grade 12s, and grade 11s, but the grade 7s who are closest to you, they had only had 5 weeks of learning how to use Microsoft Teams. So it was very, very new to them. But I think the fact that everybody felt safe, it didn't matter if they made a mistake, because everybody would jump in to help. Nobody laughed, nobody teased, because they also know, and I set this up as a very important rule at the beginning of the year, we are a community, we are a family in that room, and we have to look after each other. So if you see somebody struggling, you help them. And it got to a point where if somebody didn't know their maths, they would put it onto Teams and the conversations, and they'd say, does somebody know how to do blah? And then 4 or 5 people would say, yes, I know how to do that. And they would share the information, or they'd go into a chat and do it. So actually caring about each other made it possible for them to survive in a much better way than I even might have imagined. The other older students were much better off because they knew how to do different things. But the younger ones came in very new, uncertain, didn't know each other, had only had 5 weeks to make friends. And going into high school is kind of scary, when you've come from primary school. So I think they did incredibly well. And one of my students actually said, had it not been for their communication every day on Teams, she didn't know how she would have coped. So make the most of it. Take initiative. If you're in a class where people aren't doing anything, you be the person to make that difference. That's your job.
Wonderful.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
I think Kannan has a question, and there are some more questions, but
okay.
We would be running out of time if we continue. I would suggest you all give me your questions. I'll mail them to ma'am, and she would send us back the answers. Kannan,
I'm actually into my evening. I'm happy to stay until the questions are answered if it suits you. But it may not.
Yeah, I have that exchange program coming up with Valentina School, so I will have to move over. Anyway, Kannan, yes, you can ask your question.
Ma'am, my question is, ma'am, as you are aware, each year 7 million people die due to exposure to fine particles in polluted air. For this reason, India banned firecrackers on Diwali. What initiative has the Australian government taken to reduce pollution, apart from no firecrackers on Guy Fawkes Day?
Ah, sweetheart. I don't think we have too many firecrackers on Guy Fawkes Day. But in England, we used to, but it doesn't happen in Australia. We do have the odd firecracker event, but it's not like Diwali. Is it Diwali? We have cut emissions in our industry quite substantially. It's not as low as it needs to be, but it has been reduced. We no longer have open fires in homes because we are trying to reduce, obviously, the burn and the pollution that comes from coal. We are working at renewable energy, wind farms, hydroelectric schemes particularly. We do have a coal industry, but they are looking at not creating, I think it's black coal. There are different types of coal that can be used. One of the things I'm concerned about is that one of the energy sources that they're looking at is fracking, and that can be quite dangerous on a whole range of levels. So finding a balance between the original sources, the traditional sources of energy that we've used that give off awful pollution, and the new ones, you've got to actually be very conscious. You can't just jump in. You must actually be very informed. But in terms of what we do independently, I think people are making a point of trying to cut down the methane that's going into the environment by composting, for example. And we're doing it, and in most houses we have recycling bins. At school, we have recycling bins for 4 different types of rubbish. So in terms of what we're doing generally in Australia, we're doing something. Are we doing enough? I don't think so. But then that's the whole point of being an advocate and wanting to take action. We have to keep people moving in the right direction. And even if it's a small thing, that's one small step. You can't jump, you can't eat a mountain. You have to take little chunk pieces. I wasn't going to say elephant because eating an elephant could just be really ugly and messy.
Okay, so Kriday, are you there, and are you going to wind up the session for today? I'm so sorry, Judith, I really need to leave for that.
That's okay, I understand.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Please.
Ma'am, this was such an amazing session. Ma'am, and I really enjoyed your anecdote about the craziest milkshakes. It was indeed a pleasure speaking to you and getting to know about the SDGs and how students like us can help promote them. Thank you for your valuable time once again, ma'am.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And it was so lovely meeting you all.
I think Devansh and somebody, I could see that there was a question, your message for youngsters. So I think that's a question that comes from all of them. So
Yes.
Juliet, you need to wind up the session with your message to all the youngsters, of course, the 9 of them who are here, as well as their peer group, so that they can spread it across.
I
Thank
would
you so
say
much.
my message to all of you is wake up in the morning, take time to look out of the window, celebrate the life you have and the people in it. Hug your parents, hug your big brothers and little sisters, or vice versa. And realize that you have all of the tools you need to make a difference to the world you're living in. You don't want to be passengers. You want to be participants. You want to educate, you want to advocate, and you want to take action for the world that you want to live in. That would probably be it.
So what do you all have to say about the message? Have you taken the message? Wake up, look out of the window, hug your parents, celebrate life, and hug your annoying brother, sister, whosoever it is.
Gee, one of the things, the biggest things you've got to remember is when people are really challenge you, they are a lesson in patience. And that's just one skill you're going to have to learn. So patience, this whole pandemic has been a really good lesson in patience and gratitude, because we can actually be grateful for the things that we have and appreciate the things that we've missed when we actually get them back again.
Yes, wonderful.
And be nice to teachers. Be very, very, very nice to your teachers.
They are nice, very nice. Anyway.
Let me introduce you to Darcy.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Say hello, Darcy.
Hi, Darcy. Can you see Darcy?
Darcy is a big black Labrador.
Yes.
So
So you can thank Juliet ma'am, and then we can leave.
Ma'am, I would like to say something.
Yes.
Sorry, somebody?
Who wants to say
I would like to say something.
Okay.
Ma'am, thank you for your precious time. And I really agree that teachers are most effective because they do so much for us students.
That's lovely. You're a sweetheart.
So, like, thank all the teachers.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Thank
you so much, Samriddhi.
Thank you.
Beautiful message. And I think they are just 10-year-olds, first time they are sitting and talking and asking questions. They were very, very excited. Hopefully you had a wonderful time and you enjoyed talking.
I'm impressed. I am very impressed. It's been an absolute joy for me, and I'm happy to do it anytime. So
Thank
please
you
do.
so much. Wonderful.
You take care.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Bye, bye, beautiful
Bye.
people.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you, mom. Bye, mom.
Bye,
Bye.
bye.
Ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Bye, ma'am.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. So let's see the children disappear. Bye, Samriddhi. Bye, Kunan. Bye, Kriday.